Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings. But this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018. And no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. Kelly McMasters is the author of The Leaving Season, a memoir and essays. And by the way, I loved this book so much that I have chosen it for Zibby's Book Club. So you can join Zibby's Book Club by going to zibbysbookclub.com and signing up, and you can join our 30-minute conversation followed by 30-minute Q&A with Kelly McMasters herself. Kelly is an essayist, professor, mother, and former bookshop owner. She is the author of The Leaving Season, a memoir and essays, and co-editor of the ABA national bestseller, Wanting, Women Writing About Desire. Her first book, Welcome to Shirley, a memoir from an atomic town, was listed as one of Oprah's top 5 summer memoirs and is the basis for the documentary film, The Atomic States of America, a 2012 Sundance selection. The anthology she co-edited with Margot Kahn, This is the Place, Women Writing About Home, was a New York Times editor's choice. Her essays, reviews, and articles have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post Magazine, the Paris Review, the American Scholar, River Teeth, a journal of narrative nonfiction, Tin House, Newsday, Time Out, Columbia Magazine, and Mr. Beller's Neighborhood, among others. She holds a BA from Vassar College and an MFA in nonfiction writing from Columbia's School of the Arts and is the recipient of a Pushcart nomination and an Orion Book Award nomination. Kelly has spoken about creative nonfiction at TEDx, authors at Google, and more. She is also taught at MediaBistro.com, Franklin and Marshall College, and in the undergraduate writing programs and journalism graduate school at Columbia University, among others. She is currently an associate professor of English and director of publishing studies at Hofstra University in New York. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss your memoir, The Leaving Season, a memoir and essays.
Thank you so much, Zibby. I'm thrilled to be here. It's really exciting.
As I was just saying to you before we started, I am 100% obsessed with this book. It's the best book I've read in so long. It's so good. And, I just talked, it'll be the September book club pick for Zibby's Book Club. So that's great. And also we've started all these local chapters. So now people can read, not just virtually, but all over, and hoping to grow that even more by September. So, and in fact, if anyone listening wants to start a book club chapter, you can email info@zibbysbookclub.com and start your own chapter, and we'll give you all the tools you need. But this book is so good and everyone has to read it.
Thanks, Zibby. I really, that means the world, especially as, somebody who has traveled some similar roads.
I know. I also really love Maggie Smith's book, and I was on Instagram and watched it. Obviously you were at her event and supporting her and loved her book, and as did everybody. But I do feel like the two of them go hand in hand, those two books. And in fact, if anyone is ever getting a divorce, this should be the gift package. Okay, here you go. Just read these two books. End of story.
I love that. And yes, Maggie's book is amazing. I was so thrilled when she read mine and wrote her beautiful blurb for The Leaving Season. And, I hope maybe what you're talking about is that both books, even though they are covering some really difficult terrain, ultimately they are stories of hope and renewal. Yes. So that is what I think I needed when I was going through the divorce, especially what I still need every day, even though I'm way past it. And that's what I hope that this book can ultimately be.
Yes. Well, it's about sort of reinvention, and it doesn't have to be divorce. It could be anything you're going through that sort of didn't go the way you thought, or for anyone who's felt like there was a time in their life when they were kind of losing themselves a little bit in for whatever the reason, career, loss, relationships, there's so many reasons so many ways we lose touch with ourselves. And this is all about getting back to it. And I don't, and hers, I think, in a way. But anyway, maybe I should back up. Okay, Kelly, why don't you tell listeners what the leaving season is about?
All right. Well, the leaving season is about just that. The fact that leaving takes a very long time. And there are so many different types of leaving, which is what you were just talking about. There's leaving, jobs, leaving places, leaving homes, leaving a self behind, and of course, leaving marriages. And I think when I was putting these essays together, and they are essays, individual essays, although they can be read all together as one cohesive story, I think that is really what I realized was it was a collection of moments when I should have left, didn't leave, left when I shouldn't have, all of these different types of leavings. And I think when I was going through the divorce and people would hear that I was divorced or going through a divorce, their number one question was always, they would pull me to the side of either a wedding or a PTA event and say, how did you know it was the right thing to do? How did you know you had to leave? And I think that's the other point of the book is A, there's no one answer. And B, that answer is always changing. And so I think that's true for every type of leaving.
Well, you also made a good point when people were asking you, which I personally found as well, that it's mostly about their needing to figure out what they should do about their own relationships. In fact, I'm almost positive I dog-eared this page because I loved what you wrote about it. So I'm just going to read this. Was there a moment you knew you wanted to end your marriage? This is the question everyone always asks, the still married ones, after one too many glasses of wine at the PTA fundraiser, at the ladies' lunch after chaperoning the first grade aquarium trip, in the corner of the patio at the neighborhood 4th of July party alongside the dance floor at weddings. After a while, I came to understand that they were really asking about themselves, matching their experience with mine, pulling a measuring tape around my rib cage, and then circling their own to see how close the numbers fell. I mean, it's like poetry, it's so true. I've tried to explain the same thing, but I like the way you wrote that, I would never have thought to compare it to a measuring tape around my rib cage. Beautiful. So beautiful.
Thank you so much. I think people both wanted the numbers to match up and not, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's because if you know, you don't need somebody else to tell you. And yet you don't want it to be true. If you know you have to leave, the hardest thing is admitting that to yourself, I think, because once you do, there's no turning back. And that's the hardest part is actually moving through it and making that choice and saying it aloud. That's terrible. And I think there's this very close to that section. I talk about feeling like I'm in Divorceville, this sort of one-horse town that is just the same. Yes. And my amazing editor, Jill, she loved that section. And for a period, this book was called Divorceville. But I think ultimately the book is, like you said, it's for somebody who's has been through a divorce, but also it extends beyond that.
Yes, far beyond it. That's something that you do so well is just like take the ordinary and just make it so beautiful. And what you said about debating leaving or when you're trying to decide, there's that one moment when you saw the house for sale in your town and you were like, what would my life be like if I lived there? And I think you like wrote down the number and just like kept it for a little bit.
Yes.
I don't know, that moment of you like looking at the house and like how we all imagine these other lives, like what if?
Mm-hmm. Right. My life would be perfect if I could only.
Yep.
But then, of course, and that's, the book takes place across 3 particular landscapes. We start in the city, we move to the country, and then we end up in suburbia, where I still am. And I think that also happens with the excitement and possibility of moving. It feels like I'm a professor as well, and the beginning of school, right? The end of every August, whether it's for my kids when we go school supply shopping or for myself, this semester, I will be organized and I will not get behind and I'm going to be great. I'm going to be a different person. And you would think after 47 years that I would know myself by now. But no, the right pen is going to change everything. And I think similarly, we play tricks like that within our relationships, right? The problem isn't us. It's where we're living. It's the damn house renovation. It's the dog, right? No, it's you. And so that's really difficult to come to terms with and to then think, all right, what part of it is me and not the other person? And what do I need to do about that?
Wow. So amazing. Why did you decide to name your ex like R period? I feel like it's similar to the Danny Shapiro technique of naming.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, this book, and I hope readers will feel this too, is about me. My children are present. He is present. Plenty of other people are present. But ultimately, while this is a divorce story, and I actually like to call it a love story. I mean, every divorce story begins as a love story, right?
Yes.
It ultimately turns into a love story with myself in a strange way, right? I fall out of love with my husband, but I fall in love with this possibility of motherhood in a way that I did not understand could be possible. And for me, it's a personal story. This will not be the same for everyone, but in my experience, I was only able to become the mother that I think I had the potential to become once I left my marriage, once I became a single mother. And I was so afraid of becoming a single mom. I didn't think I could handle the kids on a normal day on my own, much less every day on my own. And yet, once that happened and I was able to really interrogate and ask the questions, what kind of mother do I want to be, rather than just responding and reacting all the time, that turned into a really beautiful relationship. And I think in that way, I wanted to keep the spotlight in that area. And, I do think that I give the reader a sense of who R is and was. And so it's not that he's effaced on the page or a ghost or anything like that, but he's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about him ultimately. It's about the changes that I went through, the new observations that I was making, and the way that those came to play. And even, we owned a bookshop, which I'm so excited for your.
Yes, I was going to mention that. I couldn't wait to talk about it.
And, that bookshop was amazing for so many reasons. And that was perhaps the most heartbreaking part, having to leave that bookshop. But that bookshop showed me who we were and who we could never be. And so in that respect, I did feel like it was best to leave him with an initial. He has presence, but also make sure, my children are also not named, and that was intentional. But that way, the story is trained on my narrator as a chronicler, which is sort of how I wrote my first book as well. And I think that that's an important point of view in nonfiction that I feel comfortable in. It's not necessarily that the spotlight is on me, but that the observations come through me and only me. And so it is observed. It is, first person in every way.
Interesting. All right. That's good. I know some people have a different name, they change the name or don't have a name. I don't know, but it was a very literary, beautiful convention. I liked it. It was great. And of course the spotlight is on you, and it's so immersive that you even give us just every sound and feeling. And I feel like I went into nature, which of course I didn't. I was sitting inside reading this most of the time. And even your musings on why suburban trees don't smell. And when you're in a playground, why are you not smelling trees? But when you go out into nature, that's all you smell. And just all these little thoughts, which change the way you see the world. I don't know. Wait, go back to the bookstore, because I love that section of the book and I wanted to talk to you about it and all the relationships you made with the people there and the ones you lost. And I know I don't want to give things away, but that was an amazing part of the book. Tell me a little more about that experience and looking back on it, how you feel. I mean, I read it, but.
Sure. So it was, like many things in my life at that point, a very sort of last minute decision. A friend had a space. We were in rural Pennsylvania. And so I imagine the cost analysis was very different than, for example, when you had to put your bookstore together. It was $1 a square foot. So we had 250 square feet, $200 a month. I mean, $250 a month. So it was not a terrifying venture in that way. Although then I had to learn, okay, how do I make an LLC? How do I have a relationship with Ingram? All of those crazy questions. Now, of course, I had a life in books for many years before that, never as a bookstore owner, which is very different. But I ran a lot of readings. I ran KGB reading series and, reviewed and wrote books and all of that. So I knew that this was a dream that I maybe thought might occur when I was, 80, right? But never actually be a business that I could have. And I think what really cinched it for me was I grew up in a town without a bookstore. And so I just lived in the library, essentially. It was where I had my first job, and my children then were going to grow up in a town without a bookstore. And I realized not only would this feed me, but it would feed them. And I had this sort of idealized image in my head of them, walking to the bookstore after school with their backpacks and coming in. And so, obviously they were very little when this began. And I think in the opening scene, I'm shelving books and I still have my youngest in a baby Bjorn, basically. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, so if he naps this long, what can I do when he's attached to me? What can I do when he's not? And it was beautiful and improvised. And I would, childcare in the country is as difficult as it is anywhere else, right? But that bookstore became such a community in a way that I didn't know that I needed. And I know exactly what you mean about the people we lost. I mean, that was, 10 years ago almost. And I just completed the audiobook a few weeks ago. And when I read that section, I just wept. And I wrote it, I knew what was coming, but it still guts me every time. And I think, that came out of a column that I wrote for the Paris Review Daily called Notes from a Bookshop. And I started this little monthly missive about what it was like. And I think when I came to the end of that, I never wrote the last one because it was too heartbreaking to say we're closing. And so it always felt unfinished. And when I came to this book, I knew that was going to be the center. And I knew that I would have to write the end. And that was probably one of the hardest parts.
It's another leaving.
Yeah.
Well, it was, and by the way, my store is only 823 square feet. So, and we have a great deal on the space. Not as great as that, but the owner really wanted a bookstore. So we have it far below market, which is wonderful. But already having the community spot is so huge. And the gratitude from the community is out of this world. And this is part of a giant city. Right? This is a section of LA, as opposed to a tiny town that would crave a bookstore. I take it so for granted growing up in big cities that there are bookstores.
Same. I did too. And that was when I realized I had to drive, nearly 100 miles to get to the Golden Notebook, which is one of my favorite bookstores in Woodstock.
Yeah.
But that's a really long drive.
Yeah.
So, and it does, it affects the culture. And so when I realized the only books that I was finding were from the library or the old church book sales.
Mm-hmm.
And so every book that came into the house had that funk, that smell of other people. And still I have a whole section in my bookcase of those books. And the idea of choosing and then having a new book and being able to support a writer whose books are coming out right now. And then just walking into a room and knowing that you're going to find someone who wants to talk about books with you is just incredible. And likely you're going to find other things in common too.
Yes. Book lovers have something in common. It's a whole subset of people, which is great. You wrote a lot also about sort of struggling financially to make all of this work. And you wrote about it in detail and with such compassion for yourself and for anyone in the same situation, where even if you're working 3 jobs and even if you're doing everything right, it's like impossible. It's like a tsunami heading your way and you just like feel powerless. Talk a little bit about that and how it felt to write about it. And if you're, just how you feel about it, the whole thing.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about that. I think that is something that is really important to me in terms of my life as a writer, as well as the economics of a bookshop, as well as the economics of being a single parent. I think people are terrified to talk about money and the realities, and the secrecy that's shrouded in that I felt drowned me in shame. And then when I did start talking to people, I realized, oh my gosh, not only is this not abnormal, am I not doing something wrong? Other people are feeling the same thing. And they might have some suggestions that can help me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think is really important, just being open about that kind of stuff. I think, in my writing life, I've tracked ideas about poverty and shame and, working class. That's when I grew up in Shirley. That was my first book. And that relationship between working class shame and the feeling of powerlessness really felt familiar when we moved to the country. And so in the city, it's a little easier to pretend, right? Because, and I write about this, we were living in an artist's loft with no hot water. And so and no shower or anything like that. And so I'm, showering at the gym around the corner. Then we would go to a really fancy dinner with a collector. And so in New York, it's a little easier to pretend because you can do a lot with a little.
Mm-hmm.
And the magic is on every block. And so you can sort of figure things out and improvise in a way that you can't in the country. In the country, the beauty is all around you naturally, right? So I felt so rich just walking out into this tangle of raspberry bushes and these little newts and, being able to see and smell and feel this gift of the wild that I didn't have in the city. But people there were struggling in a way that did remind me of when I was growing up in my hometown. And it was it affected people similarly in their hearts,
mm-hmm.
right? And in their brains. And so feeling less than. And I think really it was, I don't want to attach shame to it, but for me, and I still have those damn yellow cards.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. When we had to go on assistance. And that was, I was the first in my family to go to college. My parents were so supportive. We had a beautiful home and upbringing and full of love. And my dad said, you don't have to get married. You are enough on your own. You are going to college. Education is the number one thing. And so I really did at a point feel like I would just float off after college on this sort of golden cloud that everything is good now. I did it. I made it. And that's not what happened. So when I suddenly was handed these yellow cards and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm back where I started in a way when, yes, I had 3 jobs. I opened a bookshop, all of these things were going so well, really. I have this beautiful home and I thought, okay, something needs to change. And I think that was a really important moment for me to sort of not just change financially, but just look at everything. And everything did change from then on. And I think the idea that, I still have, I probably have 4 jobs now. And, I think that's just the nature of what I've chosen to do, right? I'm a professor, I'm a writer, I run, all these little things, these half jobs.
Wait, what are your other half jobs?
Oh gosh.
Because after the book, I was like, I want to know every single thing about her. I want to know what she's doing now. Like, like I want the full postscript of the book.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I direct a program in publishing studies and I'm a teacher. I'm a professor of English, of creative writing, mostly nonfiction. And then I also am a freelance writer and I also am a book writer. And I also am part of this educational nonprofit that's run in my town. I'm a mom, all this stuff. And I also edit and, do private editing clients and things like that most writers do to make it work.
And you edit anthologies.
And I edit anthologies. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. Yes, I love doing that work. And that's the thing. I love it all. I wouldn't change it. And some of that, again, goes back to community. And, the education community here is incredible. The community of women writers through the anthologies is incredible. And so I feel so fortunate. I would love to own a bookstore again at some point. I can't add that right now. But yeah, that of course is also still on my list of dream jobs.
Amazing. I want to figure out a way so that anybody who wants to open a Zibby's bookshop in their town, they just franchise it. And I have a kit or something so that it's easy for people. And I don't know, that's my big dream.
Zibby, I love that idea. Oh my gosh.
So
wow.
I could just put the wallpaper I use, or I don't know, make them all kind of look the same-ish. Not exactly, but you get to curate the books, but it has to be in a new way, in an interesting way. So, I don't know. Anyway.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I think books are just a way to talk about life and feelings and each other and connect. And it's all just a shorthand, really. So having a space to do that helps. Yeah. I don't know. Are you writing another book? What's going on with that?
I am waiting to hear about a few grants that will help me write the book that I think I want to write.
Okay.
But yes, so I will just say yes. My great-grandmother was in vaudeville. And so about, 100 years ago, when we like to think women had it much worse, we couldn't vote yet. We had all of these, difficult circumstances. And she was such a modern woman and really wild and incredible and, performed with Mae West. And she was the kind of vaudeville where she was funny and not sexy. Mm-hmm. And so she was smart, funny, and she went on, and I have this old journal of hers, but she made some decisions that wound up erasing her from our family tree. And so, yes, and it had to do with the choice between work and her children. And so I'm trying to, first find the real story, because I'm not 100% certain that it is what I think it is. But I think it's really interesting in this sort of, 2023, where we think we've kind of busted through all of this, all of these ways that women were historically held down. And in many ways, what I'm finding, looking back at her history, is how free she was and how not unlike me. We made different decisions, but the sort of the cost of ambition, female ambition, choices in motherhood, they all are still the same in some surprising ways.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have to go back. I was with Joanna Rakoff this weekend at this retreat that we did. I know. And I was raving about your book. And she, of course, was like, well, have you gotten to this part? And I was like, I'll let you know. And I kept going. But she was saying, oh, well, you have to go back and read her first book. It was so good. And I was like, okay, I'll go back. Oh, gosh. Anyway, I'm almost out of time here. I can't believe this. I feel like I've been wandering in this podcast because I want to talk to you about so much in this book, but I just hope that listeners can get the sense that I'm just so excited about your book and think you are so talented and amazing. And I'm so rooting for you in everything now that we've gone through this whole journey with you. I can't even explain it. So
Zibby, thank you. And I just want to say that I really appreciate you sharing your journey, especially, the single mom part that you have been so open about in places like Instagram that really helped me. And I hope that in many ways, this book would be, for example, a perfect Mother's Day gift, because it celebrates a motherhood that isn't often freely celebrated and talked about. And so I just want to thank you for being a part of normalizing that, of making that not something scary to divulge and talk about. And thank you for sharing.
Sure. I don't know if my husband would like me being called a single mother. He feels like he's such a part of things, but that's okay.
Solo mom.
No, you know what I mean. It all,
yes.
Yeah, I get it. Anyway, congratulations. And I saw you're doing your event with Lee Newman at Books Are Magic, so I'm going to try to come if I can. But
oh my gosh,
I really want to come. Anyway, have so much fun, and I hope this gets all the success in the world.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the news. I'm so excited.
Yay.
I'll see you in September.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.